main, my main Torah that I use is his. Aviva uses a different one just so we can read different commentaries. And it feels like either he missed a bunch of stuff that we picked up on, or they just said, stop already, time to send the galleys.
Which I think applies to much of the Torah, saying,
Yeah.
"Don't worry, they'll fill in the blanks later." So, well,
Yeah.
let me get.
I would have rather that, I think the approach that Rashi takes, which is to suggest a question, the prompt question that leads you to the discussion, is a much better way than telling people what something means.
Yep.
I'm going to get us started here. I've got us on the on the live stream, and we are in Shemini. Two of Aaron's sons figure in a dramatic and tragic part of Shemini when Nadab and Abihu are struck dead after they offer strange fire to God. We get a graphic, almost photographic take in The Two Priests Are Destroyed by a Victorian artist that we use a lot in these Torah studies. As he always does in his biblical art, James Tissot includes some very specific details, such as the form of the table used in the Mishkan where the incense fire pan is burning, exactly as described in the earlier parshot about the construction of the tabernacle and its ritual objects. This is among many of Tissot's Torah-inspired paintings that are now in the collection of the Jewish Museum in New York. The Torah doesn't exactly say what they did, only that they offered strange fire, or foreign fire, as American-born Israeli artist Yoram Ranaan portrays it. He says the tension of conflicting energies is reflected in the opposing colors, in contrast to the striking greenish hues, the color of nature and of life. The strong reds and oranges suggest passion and life as they burn. As Nadab and Avihu offer their strange fire, a divine fire consumes them. They become one with the fire, rising upward as the flames dance between life and death. The flames that consume Aaron's sons are also the focus of the Shemini painting in the Women of the Book collaboration by 54 Jewish women artists, one for each parsha. This is by Canadian artist Leah Crust.
The parsha's theme is Lahavdil ben HaKodesh uvein HaChol, uvein HaTameh, uvein HaTahor, to separate holy from unholy and the impure from the pure. In this parsha, there are two sacrifices. One, God sends down flames and accepts it. The other, God sends down flames and doesn't accept it. In the second situation, a shocking event, two of Aaron's sons are killed. What I wanted to do was take the flames and show how, although they're all beautiful, some can be damaging and some can be illuminating and accepting. And that's a lesson for our lives, that the holy and the unholy are close together, the pure and the impure are close together, and we have to work to make the right choices and use integrity.
That's Leah Crust, and this is her piece of work for Shemini in Women of the Book. American designer, author, and liturgist Joanne Fink puts the divide between the consecrated and the ordinary at the center of her Shemini painting, graphically illustrating chapter 10, verse 10 from the Parsha, distinguish between holy and profane, because she says it encapsulates something she returns to again and again in her spiritual practice, the challenge and the privilege of recognizing the divine in everyday moments, clear-cut in some cases, but also hard to make out in others. That's from Florida-based Joanne Fink. The alien fire, Esh Zareh, is the theme of this Shemini painting from Nira Or, illuminating the weekly Torah portion by American artist Lizzie Sivitz and Rabbi Haley Goldstein, who provides Talmudic commentary. While the death of Aaron's sons is the tragic result of not strictly obeying God's commands, Rabbi Goldstein offers this alternate interpretation. It may be that the fire that Nadav and Avihu were consumed by was not a punishment from God, but rather a divine light too bright for humans to witness. Though they may have had the best intentions, Nadav and Avihu violated the boundaries that were in place to keep them safe. The word Kedusha, usually translated as holiness, at its root means to separate, distinguish, or set apart. As with any relationship, in order to truly connect to God, we need boundaries and containers. That's from Rabbi Haley Goldstein in Nira Or. And the dramatic colors filled the scene as envisioned by English-born Israeli artist Darius Gilmont, the two young priests holding the incense pans with their greenish, strange fire as flames from above encircle them, a scene of pathos in the usually whimsical art by Darius Gilmont. Shemini also lays out the basic rules of kashrut, the foods we may or may not consider edible. Here's a deceptively graphic representation by Israeli-born, Argentina-raised, now Brooklyn resident Tamara Kosteniavsky. Her realistic-looking sculptures are assembled from multicolor fabric, much of it from her own closet, because in her art student days she couldn't afford to purchase materials, so she used what she had at hand. But like the laws of kashrut, she designs her installations to encourage people to understand where and how the food they choose to eat comes from.
I make sculptures and installations. The imagery that's most dominant in the work has to do with carcasses. I grew up in Argentina. It's like a very big meat-oriented culture, and these images of hanging beef had been sort of part of my childhood and experience. My father was also a surgeon, so I grew up surrounded by images of the open body, which also kind of, together with the carcasses, sort of like led me on this path. So I think that those two things combined, sort of like a thirst for something artistic and this like very early discovery of a world behind the skin brought me to this place. Over time, the carcasses sort of took some turns and they became very political, especially at the beginning. In the end, I feel that I want to provide like an aesthetic experience, one that is fun and rewarding and exciting and things that you haven't seen before, which is sort of like what all artists want to do, sort of to touch on somebody's emotional and aesthetic sense to create an experience that is outside of like the everyday life.
And that's sculptor Tamara Kosteniavsky, and that's our art for Shemini.
Thank you. That was really different, especially that last artist.
Yeah, I'm looking her up right now. I never heard of her. I want to see more fabric meat.
Would you hang one in your house?
Maybe a few. You got to make there's got to be a powerful effect. And just one haunch is not good enough. Three or four.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we might have Vic on. It says iPhone, but I hope that's Vic. That is Vic.
That is Vic.
Yay.
Great.
Sarah's not here. Does anyone know why Sarah's not here? I may text her also. She's usually on.
I know she wasn't feeling good on the day of the board meeting.
So I guess we should definitely mention Sarah and Marilyn and so members of our congregation. The list gets longer, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sick again.
Oh, sorry. I hope it wasn't the trip over here that did it.
It started that way on the way back. Yeah.
Oh dear. Sorry.
That's okay.
The fog is really affecting my sinuses, I'll tell you.
Yehuda, I'm saying we should bail for you. Get over that cough already. And to everyone else for their bodies, spirits, and souls.
Craig, you were saying?
I was saying my friend Danny Lovett.
I'll add my sister, Kaya Mulberg. Jean Abercrombie. And maybe a little one for myself because I got to start exercising more because I have pain and somebody tells me that it's not bursitis, it's some band along the femur that I'm not stretching out enough.
I'll throw in a pitch for water aerobics. Craig joined us the other day. Aside from the fact that he's taller than anybody else and we're in the shallow water, so the poor guy had to stoop over during a lot of the exercises, but it gets you moving.
Yeah.
Where's this, Alan?
At the Kona Community Pool. 3 mornings a week we meet and jump around and have nice conversations and occasionally exercise.
Yeah.
Okay. For the whole world, here we go. Source of strength, bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheberachim otenu, Makor habracha, Yotenu, bless those in need of healing, with refuah shlema, the renewal of spirits, and let us say, Amen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So everybody would like to unmute so we can say the bracha together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu so b'divrei Torah.
Well, Heather, since you may not stay with us for a while, would you like to start us off?
Sure thing.
Okay.
Well, I see Sarah has joined in, by the way.
Okay.
So.
Okay,
On
great.
the 8th day, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. He said to Aaron, take a calf of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for the burnt offering without blemish, and bring them before the Lord. And speak to the Israelites, saying, take a he goat for a sin offering, a calf and a lamb, yearlings without blemish for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for an offering of well-being to sacrifice before the Lord, and a meal offering with oil mixed in. For today the Lord will appear to you. They brought to the front of the tent of meeting the things that Moses had commanded, and the whole community came forward and stood before the Lord. Moses said, this is what the Lord has commanded that you do, that the presence of the Lord may appear to you. Then Moses said to Aaron, come forward to the altar and sacrifice your sin offering and your burnt offering. Make expiation for yourself and for the people, and sacrifice the people's offering and make expiation for them as the Lord has commanded. Aaron came forward to the altar and slaughtered his calf for the sin offering. Aaron's son brought the blood to him, and he dipped his finger in the blood and put on the horns of the altar. And he poured out the rest of the blood on the base of the altar. The fat, the kidneys, and the protuberance from the liver, from the skin offering, he turned into smoke on the altar as the Lord had commanded Moses. And the flesh and the skin were consumed in fire outside the camp. Then he slaughtered the burnt offering. Aaron's sons passed the blood to him, and he dashed it against all sides of the altar. They passed the burnt offering to him in sections, as well as the head, and he turned it into smoke on the altar. He washed the entrails and the legs and turned them into smoke on the altar with the burnt offering. Next, he brought forward the people's offering. He took the goat for this people's sin offering and slaughtered it and presented it as a sin offering like the previous one. He brought forward the burnt offering and sacrificed it according to regulation. He then brought forward the meal offering, and taking a handful of it, he turned it into smoke on the altar, in addition to the burnt offering of the morning. He slaughtered the ox and the ram, and the people sacrificed of well-being. Aaron's sons passed the blood to him, which he dashed against every side of the altar, and the fat parts of the ox and the ram, the broad tail, the covering fat, the kidneys, and the protuberances of the livers. They laid these fat parts over the breast, and Aaron turned the fat parts into smoke on the altar, and elevated the breast and the right thighs as the elevation offering to the Lord, as Moses has commanded. Aaron lifted his hands for the people and blessed them, and then he stepped down from this offering, after offering the sin offering, at the burnt offering and the offering of well-being. Moses and Aaron then went to inside the tent of meeting. When they came out, they blessed the people, and the presence of the Lord appeared to all the people. Fire came forth from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat parts on the altar, and the people saw and shouted and fell on their faces.
Okay.
Okay.
We are going to, most of the discussion is going to be on the next 7 lines, so I feel like.
I want to start by asking about the sense of the entire community being there. We've already discussed all these numbers that they had of the tens of thousands of people, and yet the Mishkan was a relatively small space. So can we infer from that it was representatives of each of the, or whoever could crowd in? I'm not sure what the scene must have been like.
So the very beginning lines of this parasha offer a number of clues to how to read it. First of all, there's a naming, Shmini. The 8th day is considered a holy day, right? There's something about the ability for rebirth and, rejuvenation on the 8th day. So the 8th day, the concept of 8 is very, very important in Judaism. And it also signifies a readiness, right? So here's the beginning of the Mishkan is ready, and now it's being consecrated. So the naming of the parasha is very important. And then the whole order, the choice of the wording about how the offerings are made come from other places. There's a very distinct sense of order and exactness. And then what you're alluding to, this idea of the entirety of the congregation, because that's in 2 different ways is mentioned, because it says, speak to Bnei Israel, to the children of Israel, in line number 3. So that's kind of general. It's like, okay, all of Bnei Israel, but in case you're wondering, there's the wording that says, Vayikrevu kol ha'edah, in line 5, it says that the entirety of the congregation came forward. So kol ha'edah is another clue. And then also at the end of line 6, Vayira alechem kvod Adonai, speaking in the first person to the entirety. And it says, and God will, the presence of Adonai may appear to you. That seems benign in English, but the Hebrew says, Vayira alechem, in the first person in plural, to all of you, the glory of Adonai. So it builds, and in every way we have this image that appears very much like the gathering at the foot of Mount Sinai.
Mm.
So in English it doesn't appear, but in the Hebrew it feels like building blocks that build up to this. And so the physical space, again, we can discuss the physical space, we can discuss the minutia of the actual offerings, but they were mentioned before. The space was already mentioned as a place for God to dwell among the people. So whether they all fit or not, or whether people's hearts were big enough to fit, either way. Arnie.
Yeah, to me, it's a classic setup for a magic trick. No, seriously. I mean, you get the big flash, which can be accomplished. I can't give away too much, but it can be accomplished very easily with very basic ingredients. And then to add to that, I'm wondering if Aaron's sons, saw the big flash and they go, oh, yeah, I could do one better. I could add a little bit of this to it. And boom, they invented gunpowder, which is just simple ingredients, really. Charcoal, sulfur, and saltpeter. I don't know, if those are readily available in the desert or wherever they were, but it seems like alien fire, was something they hadn't seen before because it was alien to them. It had to be a big flash of some kind.
All right, so you're jumping into the next few lines, which is perfectly fine, because I mean, let's face it, the greatest discussion in this parasha is those lines. But I think also tying this in, we started talking about with the art, talking about kashrut, and there's a very direct line between the beginning of this parasha. It's the eighth day. Now it's time to consecrate. And then the whole end of it, which is very detailed laws of kashrut, very, very detailed. And that gap in the middle is what we get to fill in. We're moving from a time of being a people who lived among other people for whom the sign of reverence to something greater than them was sacrifice. And, we're moving away. We don't know that yet, but we're moving away from that because in the end, maybe it was the idea of sacrifice that is the reason that the temple was destroyed. And maybe the real becoming a nation was that we don't need a temple, a physical place to sacrifice, because where does God dwell? In the physical space with its restrictions on how many drops of blood and in which direction, and that's not sustainable because you get busy in the detail and you lose the core. So I see this parasha as being hinging on that, the beginning and the end, and the part in the middle, which is what you're already going into. Of what does it actually mean? Like, what does it mean to individual people who have individual roles in society?
Can't we suggest that this was a request to God to make a manifestation on earth? And that, so God's setting this particular magic trick up. And yet, it is referenced in Exodus, the same exact thing, but it's interesting because the sacrifice itself is culminated with the flash from above. So God's really not doing it yet because he feels like she feels like, it's my job to still provide the fireworks.
Go ahead, Alan.
I'm wondering, though, about having to summon God, which, I mean, this is like, we have the unlisted number, and the priests are the ones who have, they know what to dial, so you get the manifestation, and so there's the presence, and yet we're also supposed to have a concept of an all-seeing God, that they is always seeing, aware of what's going on, and doesn't necessarily have to be called to take action. Or is that part of it, that when we need something or want something or feel that we need that connection, we have to call for it?
Can this be the basic necessity of the economy of the Kohanim? We're not afforded any land. I mean, so they don't have any land. How are they supposed to sustain themselves? We better set up a butcher shop and everyone could contribute. And, we're going to have a steady flow of grain and meat and incense. And that's our economy. That's how we could keep, our survival.
I don't know where to fit this part of this in, but this idea of the relationship, the ongoing relationship between God and God's creation, is a very interesting concept that follows us through, because it almost feels like there's a relationship in the making throughout. And clearly, with the ambiguity of some of the why things have to be exactly this way, and they have to be measured, and they have to be exact, and they have to be at certain times, and only certain people can do them, and all that. That is their guidelines. They are constant reminders that don't take this lightly, whatever the this is, right? So if we talk about kashrut, for example, the idea, Maimonides supported the idea that the laws of kashrut had something to do with health. And the rabbis said, nah, that's, if we're talking about health, there would be other things to indicate that. It's about a constant reminder that even the things that you do on an everyday level require thought and consideration. So how do we, and this is going to go directly into the next section we're talking about, how do we do that without being consumed by that? Living a life that loses its a meaning in terms of how we affect other people because we're so concerned with following rules, right? And it's definitely a tension, and it's a tension of the relationship where people are trying to figure out God and God is trying to figure out people. That's how I feel. Who's Ellen? Go ahead.
I have a lot of trouble with all of this, so I like to listen to you guys. It gives me ideas because to Alan's point, we have to summon God. I keep going back to the fact that it was the people. This gets into the free choice again. It's the people who wanted a step removed from Hashem out of fear, I think, out of not being good enough or out of just naivete. Secondly, I would say in a historical context, the stiff-necked people and all the problems Moshe had and the people tending to regress to the pre-Exodus mentality, we know they're going to be attracted to other gods. They're going to be attracted to the way other people did things. And so we're in this transition period because they're trying to channel their what's the word? Proclivity to want to do sacrifice vis-a-vis even the golden calf, right? These are the symbols that people are used to, and these are the things they know. They know that animals are alive and we take out the blood and they're dead. It's all these things. So this is to give some structure and again, to not just do it helter-skelter, but to your point, Aviva, and to that artist, as I always talk about, simply to make people attentive to the distinction between the holy and the profane, the everyday and the special, So because otherwise our minds just wander or go back to our default, what do they call it? Reptilian brain. So that's my take.
But I think there's also a certain discipline that's being demanded. It's not just a matter of saying, okay, call and we'll get the answer. You have to be purified in a certain way. Like you were saying, that whole division between the mundane and the holy. And there's such precision in here about what to do with the kidneys or the lobe of the liver and where to splash the blood and I still don't know who's the cleanup crew. That's it seems like this is a very messy, noisy event, but it's very specific about things to do. It's not an easy connection.
I was just reading one of the commentaries in Safaria because I want to know why they said Aaron's sons brought him the blood. I didn't know what that meant. It says they bring it to him in vessels, what have you. God, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry, I'll have to come back. I lost it. Yeah. In the commentary, they talked about some of the symbolisms, the kidney and all that according to the rabbis, every evil or negative influence in humanity is centered in those parts of the body, the bile, the fat heart of people that It represents a greed, and these are the things that have to be literally snuffed out. So there's kind of some, physical connections. It's the symbolic meaning of the parts that are involved in this ritual. What that's
Very clearly, because we know in modern medicine, some of the measurable changes in people's bodies that have to do with like poor eating over a lifetime are manifested, in the liver and the kidneys, and you can measure them, and then you can also measure their decline when a healthy lifestyle is adopted, right? Like fatty liver is a thing that's only been really around for the last 10, 15 years, is a thing that can definitely be measured in all people who then may also progress to type 2 diabetes, for example, right? So the discipline is in all discipline is a part of the relationship in the covenant. It, you know, the rainbow says, I will not ever destroy again, but it comes with certain very specific laws, and they seem obscure at the time, but they all together symbolize that the condition of being human requires a lot of self-discipline all the time. When we talk later about kashrut and specifically about not eating animals, that's a biggie. It can be expanded to lots of other of the concepts we're talking about, but it is about mindfulness and discipline. Arnie?
So let's also remember that other civilizations at this time were making human sacrifices. And this is a big differentiation of us. So that we wouldn't be required human sacrifice. We've got all these rules, and this ought to satisfy everybody because we've got this complex ritual that's supervised by a priestly caste in a certain, ways. And if you screw up, look what happens. And, that could satisfy that need. So the need for human sacrifice is no longer needed.
Thank you. Yehuda?
I wasn't going to bring that up, and what Arnie just said, I wasn't going to bring it up until we hit that. But since he did, I think that some people consider that the death of these two sons were a sacrifice, and thereby model that if a sacrifice like this would take place, only God can do it, which means human sacrifice is out. I mean, that's my read of it as well, just like Arnie. So much of the Torah is the other people do this, we don't, we do this. But how do you actually bring that home? And you bring it home by something as shocking as this event.
Yeah.
even
The
going back to, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Even going back to what Alan mentioned in the art, which he mentioned last year too, that some say it was kind of a realization for his sons, not a punishment. It was an ecstasy of a sort. And it hit me. I was thinking that even in the Tussaud painting, not only did they look like boys, which they probably were, but they had a beatific look on their faces that didn't look like they were suffering, so to speak, So at the minimum, at least it leaves ambiguity about if this was really a terrible thing that many on the face of it will look absolutely horrendous. And partly it was, maybe to Yehuda's point, is in a weird kind of way, a kind of martyrdom for the cause to make a really dramatic statement about literally vengeance is the Lord's or whatever, and human beings should not sacrifice other human beings.
I wanted to put a limbo pole in that painting.
I just want to read that last part before we move on. So that line, and you don't need to pull it up, Alan. I got a good translation here. So the last line: Fire came forth from before Adonai and consumed the burnt offering and the fat parts of the altar, and all the people saw and shouted and fell on their faces. And this is right after the image of Aharon blessing all the people. Okay, so Aharon was a little bit of a tainted character. We know that from the story of the golden calf, right? And so yet he is the one blessing all the people together with Moses. But he comes out, Vayevarchu et ha'am, everybody. And then the glory of God was seen by all the people. So there's an all-consuming concept here that there is nobody left out, and it's a great moment. It's a magical moment, as Arnie pointed out, and we'll get into the magic of it in the next few lines, and then Arnie, you'll probably have plenty to say about it.
No.
So you want to read the next lines? It's just like 1 through 7 in book 10, in chapter 10.
Now Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, each took his fire pan and put fire in it and laid incense on it. And they offered before the Lord alien fire, which he had not enjoined upon them. And fire came forth in the Lord and consumed them. Thus they died at the instance of the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord meant when he said, 'Those near to me, I show myself holy and gain glory before all people.'" And Aaron went silent. Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, sons of Aziel, uncle of Aaron, and said to them, "Come forward and carry your kinsmen away from the front of the sanctuary to the place outside the camp." They came forward and carried them out of the camp by their tunics, as Moses had ordered. And Moses said to Aaron and his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, "Do not bare your heads and do not rend your clothes, lest you die and anger strike the whole community. But your kinsmen, all the house of Israel, shall bewail the burning that the Lord has wrought. And so, do not go outside the entrance of the tent of the meeting, lest you die, for the Lord's anointing oil is upon you." And they did as Moses had bidden.
I think it's interesting that the whole community the anger of God is going to come down on the whole community when it's actually, Aaron and the sons, and they're the only ones really involved with this up at the altar there. But yet the whole community is going to, is threatened by their actions. I think that's really interesting. Is that the way God works? The whole community is
Well, there's
punished for the sins of a few, or whatever
there's an
that
overriding
was?
concept that says Kol Israel arevim ze laze. All of Israel are responsible for one another. Or I mean, it's a complicated word, arevim, but that's the simplest of the translation, which does say that we all bear responsibility for what our people do. So that the idea that something doesn't just come up out of the blue, that the intentions of people and their character and whatever, if we only but pay attention, we would know ahead of time that somebody is maybe going down a wrong path, or
But even if you pay attention and you know somebody's going down the wrong path, if you're just a community member, I mean, you're not telling people what to do.
But in Judaism, you're not just a community member; you're a member of a people of the covenant. So it's pretty specific, and what it actually means in practice, that can be debated forever and should be debated forever. But it's about the separation of people who are the covenant people, that term refers to.
It appears to me that that's true of people almost in every society, not only Jews, where the people get whatever the leaders are doing up at the altar, or whatever that was about, because I wasn't there, whatever spiritual journey that was that his two sons got punished for. It's a Jewish thing, but it's also a worldwide thing.
I mean, I come from the school of thought that says that all the things that are in our story as Jews are universal. They're none of them specific to being Jews. They're specific to being human. That's. I'm just going to stop there because I think you guys know my thinking already. Let's see. I see Arnie and then Ruth Ellen.
So, what could have the audience done to stop Aaron's sons? Nothing. I mean, they're looking at this ritual. They've given Aaron and his sons, their permission to be the guys that do the sacrifices. They had no way to know the kids had something up their sleeve, it was considered retribution to the whole congregant, so it's a little puzzling.
Okay, keep that thought in mind. Ruth Ellen?
I'd like Alan to go to put that back up there, because that thing, again, it's very confusing to me. It is not clear whether Aaron's sons were supposed to have known better. Is this a choice? And Hashem, go to the next one. I think it was the third. He says, through me, through those close to me, through those near to me, I show myself holy and gain glory before all the people. Through those near to me.
Okay.
And there again, we talked about this before, that it sounds like it was an honor. He was honoring them to be the conduit of his recognition of this glory, and yet, taking lives, it seems very just seems very, very extreme. So I don't. It's troubling.
So you and thousands of people in thousands of years have reached the same conclusion. We don't actually know what was meant. So here are the two, to just briefly describe the two main schools of thought about this. One, Nadav and Avihu were full of themselves. They knew better, they knew more, they were eager to show off, they thought very highly of themselves, right? Ego, and there's all kinds of arguments to support this. They remained bachelors, which could indicate that nobody was ever good enough for them. Okay, so there's that school of thought. They knew better, they were going to do more. Then the other school of thought says they were so caught up in the moment, and they were so overcome with emotion that they took extra steps. So one is ego based, and the other is purely, they were caught up in the great joy of the moment, and they were, so overcome with the presence of God and the community and everything that they did this. Either way, one spins a more positive image of them, and one spins a more negative image of them. Both very, very in the realm of humans that we know. So in that context, that's how I look at it.
Then that brings me back to the whole problem with all of this, is that it's all speculation, because there's nothing expressly in the text. This is Midrash. And then it also makes me wonder, with all these remnants, even if you can say they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, this, that, and the other thing, forget the missing links, why the editors, when they wrote this down, thought it was important to include this, Yeah. I mean, obviously it's a big object lesson, but it's not clear what the lesson is, except now it just struck me, that line, stay on the path, do not go to the left or the right. And
if only knew what the path was, that would be pretty easy, wouldn't it?
to learn, to learn from the experience of others, I guess. I don't know. It's they didn't even get one do-over. We talked about that too, whether with the mercy. So all I can say, I guess it really is back to what Yehuda said, is the things you have to take on faith, is that there are certain things that only are it belong to Hashem to do and nobody else. And when Hashem does them, then there's got to be a good reason for it.
Okay, I have Alan, then Yehuda, and then Craig.
Well, I have one observation and then sort of a question. The wording, I was very intrigued this time around with the reference to the cousins who were told to take the bodies away. That is and they're identified as the sons of Aaron's uncle. Well, Aaron is Moses' brother, so isn't that Moses' uncle? Why weren't they identified? Why was that identity important to show the line through Aaron rather than through Moses? Because presumably they have the same uncle. So that's the observation. But the question I have is, does this show God expressing anger at this happen? I mean, I feel like we're talking about the Incredible Hulk when I say, we've seen him angry before. We've seen in previous parashot how he has to be talked down from taking action out of anger or expressing frustration and anger. But there's no sense of what God's choice was to do this. It just happens at a moment. And so I think the implication is it's out of anger, but I don't think it's there in the text.
Okay, I want to hear everybody else, and then I'll come back to this issue of the uncle. Craig, and then Yehuda, and then Arnie.
I too am concerned about the collective punishment being threatened. And we're all thinking about threats of violence these days. And I've thought a lot during my life about the concept of complicity. And if you have the intent to aid, promote, or facilitate the commission of a crime, then you are culpable. And when you embark on an activity, say you go to war with another country against Iran, if the United States bombs a girls' school, you are responsible for that too, and vice versa. And so we're all thinking about that, and I'm sure it's even more profound in the country of Israel, although we're part of the people of Israel. Right now, even as we speak, I think there are massive protests starting tonight in Israel to kind of distance themselves and say, hey, we don't go for this. So I just think that this is sort of unfair, especially when we acknowledge that we're not even sure what the crimes of these two boys were. And yet there's a threat that you're going to suffer the same fate if you stand with them. And it just doesn't seem fair, rational, or just. And maybe I'm missing something.
You're not missing anything. But okay, wait a minute. I have Yehuda, Arnie, and then Ruth Ellen. Go ahead, Yehuda.
I started this thinking about the order of how things are being presented. And there's this concept we've talked about in here numerous times about building a fence around the Torah, which suggests that we don't know what things really mean. So therefore, we cover ourselves by making the way we act and the things that we do greater than what things might possibly mean. And the reason I thought in those terms was what was just brought up by both Ruth Ellen and Aviva about the path. It is not obvious what the path actually was. And there wasn't very obvious as well the detail of how these individuals, Nadab and Abihu, were supposed to act because they hadn't necessarily been elucidated or written down. And yet this Torah portion begins with now we're doing much, much more detail. And the more detail allows us to build that bigger fence. I'm not sure that they had access to that, but thereby instead were being used as an example that God needed to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to present yet more details so that people would not break whatever rules he has in his own essence.
Arnie?
Yeah, I agree with Yehuda on that. And he said mostly what I was going to say, but just wanted to add it's hard for me to differentiate in my mind whether this causal relationship, this cause and effect of them dying, was at their own hands or God's hands. And, I see it more like at their hands. True, they didn't maybe follow a certain prescribed method, but, you know, and that couldn't be the fault of God. And like I said, they might have just added more fuel than it could take to contain an explosion, and things got pyrotechnically bad for them.
Um, just
Sort
one
of to
small
that.
interjection,
Okay.
Ruth Ellen. The
Sure.
answer to Alan's query about the relatives of Aharon and the relationship. So in the Hertz, it says that they were first cousins and therefore next of kin, but they were not priests. So they did not have to follow, like, if by them carrying the bodies out for burial, they would not be defiling the temple because they were not priests. They would not have to then purify. So there's always some very, very intellectual explanation that's beyond. But the whole wording of who are cousins and how people are related is not as specific. Like a brother in biblical language could also be a cousin or a different kind of relative or a kinsman. So, but in this specific one, it says they were specifically chosen because they were not sons of Aharon and therefore were not priests. So therefore, they didn't have to purify. Okay, sorry, Ruth Ellen.
No, that's right. I just add real quickly about that, the fact it said Aaron and why not Moses? Well, it didn't have to say both. This is really because this is a moment for Aaron. We talk about later that he didn't get to mourn like a father would mourn because Moshe told him not to. And in all these stories, Moshe is more like the teller and he's not supposed to be, the focus of anything. So I'll just add that in. But what I was saying, because Craig made me think about this, the notion that we start out thinking that Hashem did this out of anger. And I'm starting to think, no, it's like a tough love thing. When a baby touches a fire, if somebody's not around, if a baby falls into a pool and somebody's not around, is it anybody's fault that he was naive, that he didn't know and he drowned? These bad things happen. Bad things happen because we don't have total control in the natural world. If we could, to the degree we can say that the natural world exists the way Hashem created it, then you could sort of say these are Hashem's rules. And it's a way, again, the children of Israel, they constantly needed to be reminded of what it is they're supposed to do. We keep saying we don't totally know what the rules are. They're being shown as they go along, right? And ultimately, in this books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, Numbers, reviewing and itemizing and getting into specifics about everything that was presented, from the Torah, the Ten Commandments, or all the words that were written down. Because it's an exercise in growth. You have to be taught. Children have to be taught, right? And the bottom line is Hashem ultimately says, if you do these things, you will be fruitful and multiply. You will be comfortable. You will have everything you need. There will be peace, et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't, you're going to suffer. And we could say the same thing. If we don't learn how to control fire, we're going to be consumed by it. That brings it more to a universal object lesson in how to get along in the world.
Yep.
I like that about we can't use fire if we can't control it. Nice.
Well, and also, and you think about other cultures. I mean, this is not the Greek mythology. It's we don't know. To some degree, this is more about how to get along in the natural world than what it means in terms of symbolism of showing holiness and homage to the Lord. By doing these sacrifices. But it's all of those things at the same time.
And if you expand that to religious zealotry, which is, the the two opposing views about, Nadav and Abihu and their actions, but this idea that even with the best of intentions, that if you allow yourself to fall into zealotry of any kind, religious zealotry not accepted, not included, religious zealotry included, that it's the same idea. If you don't know what to do with it and you overdo it, there's harm there to yourself, but also to others. Because again, you proclaim to know more, to understand more, and it makes you elevate yourself, even if the intention was a good one, right? So, to me, because I have this template that I have to fit everything into, it's really easy for me to do it now, because I feel like the more I study, the more I'm like, yeah, by God, I'm right. That it's with the relationship that God wants us to have is a people to people relationship. That's how we honor God, is how we act as people. So religious zealotry, don't we know in our country and in the other country that I love so much, is the source of kind of most of the bad things happening right now. Any kind of zealotry. I understand and I'm right, so therefore I'm the one to tell you. And everything I do under that guise, our president got a dressing down from the Pope.
Yeah, last night in our conversation around the table, we identified that fundamentalism, wherever you find it, is the problem. So this parsha is about fundamentalism.
In a
Among other
sense,
things.
yeah.
Well, it's like temper what you think you know and be humble in front of that knowledge or lack thereof.
They added on to something because God didn't tell them to do whatever
Right.
they did with the fire.
Right. They claim to know what God meant.
So they did it, but back to the original thing was that the whole community gets punished, or is warned about this kind of thing. And even if I guess because the sacrifice is meant for the whole community, that somehow makes the whole community responsible. Think about that for a minute.
I think that that's the crux of, that's the heart. It seems easy on the surface, but boy, it's a minute by minute and day by day. There's
And
like, it's not like you get it, you get the formula, and then you can just rest and say, oh, I got it. The rest is easy. Ruth Ellen, and then Ellen.
Yeah, I just want to add again, because to sort of apply it into the world that we're living in now, there is nothing intrinsically right, wrong, good, bad about the tools that we have at our disposal or the natural phenomenon that help us find a way to exist. It's all about how they're used, the intention and the choice of when, where, and how to use them. So just like when that artist said, she made the circle because, it's like, if he would say, it's not a long line. It's not a line with two terminuses. It's circular, and the extremes, to Yehuda's point, even about zealotry and the extremes are very close together, and that's why the attention must be paid. That's why you have to get this discipline so that you don't fall off the wagon on either side. So, and I think that's what we're constantly struggling with in every era of, in every age of human existence, where I'm going with this now, because the fire now we could say is AI or whatever, it's just.
So are we
Anyway,
saying that because the congregation didn't rise up against these two sons doing this, that they're responsible? I mean, what were they supposed to do? What was the whole congregation? Some of the people maybe.
it was
No,
to
I'm
teach.
not
It was to
relating it
teach
to
them.
you, Ruth
No, I
Ellen,
know. Well, I didn't know you were
particularly.
asking. I think
No, I mean, I
it
know
was
I'm
teaching
asking
them.
the
Oh,
question,
okay.
but it's a rhetorical question that, maybe some of the people there didn't even see what was going on. I mean, and that maybe not everybody could see what was going on the altar there, or hear what was going on. How many thousands of people were there? So,
Mhm.
yeah, there's
Mhm.
all these questions about this kind of stuff. And, you know, if you want to bring it into the real world, like if you tell the people of Iran, well, this is a good time to rise up against your government, but yet they have no possible way of doing that, are they responsible for what their government does? We know clearly that most people in Iran do not like the government there. So, but that's not the question. It's not a political question. What I'm trying to do is paint a picture of, you know, how are these people supposed to rise up, even if they think the government is wrong, for example, just like how are the people supposed to rise up to stop Aaron's sons? So this is a big question for me. You know, and I understand I get the community thing and everything, but some things just don't seem really fair.
Let me hear Alan, and then I'm going to address that, Sarah.
Okay.
That community aspect is something that I got thinking about, not only hearing the discussion, but also I've complained in the past when we've hit this parsha about the punishment of Aaron being told you can't mourn for the death of your sons. And yet in the very next line, it says the whole community is doing that. So this is the whole community taking on the responsibility of
That's interesting
atoning
too.
for or mourning the deaths of these two young men. And so I think that makes it a different, it takes it away from being a punishment to Aaron and saying this is on all of your shoulders.
Yeah, because the sacrifice or the fire was for all of their, for the whole community.
Go ahead, Yehuda. I'll reserve the comments I was going to make.
It seems like the whole process of mourning starts as an individual thing, and it doesn't mean that the whole community can't mourn. When we have prominent members of our communities, we have great gatherings of celebration, you know, to honor their lives. But the mourning does start with the individuals most directly affected. And you notice in this, the very first thing that happens is that Aaron is silent. And it's very interesting because in Judaism, when you're doing Shiva, if the person who is mourning is silent, you don't really have, it's not proper behavior to say, I feel for your loss or anything like that. You actually wait for them to start the conversation and to bring the conversation to where they're comfortable. And so what follows with the two nephews dealing with the body and all that is it's establishing the way Shiva is in our culture, but it's not clear how it's telling us what to do.
That concept, to elaborate on what you're saying, that Aharon is not the only one in mourning. The people are in mourning, so he remains silent. In the respect that the community would remain silent if it was his personal loss, the community would have to remain silent, and he would have to be the first to speak. I think that's what you're alluding to, the custom of the Shiva. I just want to address something that Sarah brought up because, you know, we read Torah in our day, and your concerns and comments are very relevant. So look at the three countries that are right now in the heat of this war, okay? And look at the three things that are defining these countries. Iran, for a long time, has been a fundamentalist Muslim country. Israel, in its latest iteration politically, is turning into a fundamentalist Jewish country.
Right.
The United States, if you're reading in between the lines and the way, you know, members of parliament and people are responsible for whole departments are communicating with their people, there's a religious Christian fundamentalism.
Right.
Fabulous.
Pete Hegseth is quoting, we're doing this as a holy war.
Right. So what's the common denominator here? It seems like we,
Fundamentalism is fundamentally wrong.
thank you. I wanted somebody to say it in the most simple. Yes, exactly. And that's kind of what we're seeing. You know, it's been always wrong, and here we have an entire world getting involved with.
And the Saudis have gone for the Christians against the Shias, the Sunni Saudis against the Shias. It's a totally religious war, all this war. And back in that day, it seems like it was religious too, except that was pre-Allah. I mean, pre-Muhammad or whatever. But
If we look at history,
my God is bigger
many
than
of
your
these
God.
many of these problems were created by colonialism. All these countries are new countries. There wasn't a Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran per se, Israel, Palestine. None
they
of
were
those
just
countries existed, 100 years ago. And
it's Persia. Come on, Arnie. That country, Iran's been
well,
there
it was
forever.
actually Iran before it was Persia. Iran is the ancient name for it.
Well,
But
you know what I'm saying. Okay, my point exactly.
yeah, but there was no Saudi Arabia. It was that
All right.
the guys who controlled the oil for British Petroleum got to rule the country,
I
So
understand, but there was still the Christian Crusades. There was still Solomon, whatever his name was, Solidar.
Saladin,
Saladin. Yeah. So there was still, all of these religious things going on at various times, and prehistory, ancient history. Is probably my pagan god is better than your pagan god, or whatever the different tribes believed in. Yeah.
Saladin had a Jewish doctor, though.
So what?
No, I'm just
I mean,
mentioning
who doesn't have a Jewish doctor?
Before we get back, welcome.
I was just trying to make the point that this is modern history, not going back to Saladin and the Crusades, but all these countries are new, including Israel. I mean, Saudi Arabia is what, a year older than Israel? Iraq is it a couple years older than Israel? All these countries were created around the same time, and they were done, politically to favor the oil companies, basically.
So the details are different, but the basic stuff is the same, if you ask me.
And that's why I like that, of the two main thought processes on Nadav and Avihu, I subscribe to the one that says they got religiously overzealous, because it makes sense to me.
One little detail that before we get back to reading what happens next, the cousins are told that they carry them out by their tunics. Yeah. They were just taken by flame. Their tunics didn't burn. I think where else have we had a fire that didn't consume the element that was burning? Exactly. And I don't know if there's a connection there, but this idea of whether it's a punishment or whether it was carrying them to different glory, if their tunics didn't get burned up by this flame that was enough to kill them.
I think that's an interesting dilemma. Alan?
They were taken by the fire, I think is what it says. They were taken by the fire.
But there's definitely commentary that implies that it wasn't. Am I echoing? Something really was crazy over here. I'm hearing my own voice. Okay. There's a lot of commentary that alludes to the fact that the idea of the fire, both theirs and the God's fire that consumed them, were not necessarily a physical fire, but the fire of zealotry. So that's why I definitely subscribe to that, because if we're looking for logic, and thank you, Alan, for picking that up, along with seals in the desert, or
could be fumes.
I love that, because it is part of what keeps us studying, right? Like it offers you and your seeking mind an avenue that will never be boring because you will always be able to continue to seek, which is actually in the next few lines that we're going to read. There's a very important turning point in the concept of where we are in the Torah, which allows for all of this. Like, it's not, you're not just saying it to be that one who says, well, what about, that's not about whataboutism. You're doing the true thing of scrutinizing and waiting till you have a revelation, because you've looked at it from this direction and you've looked at it from this direction, and you've done it many times. So it's the tradition.
Yeah, tradition.
Go ahead,
Marilyn has her hand, Aviva Marilyn has her hand up.
I
don't
know,
if
I'm
you saw.
calling her
Yeah.
Marilyn.
Thank you. I got on late. I was watching on FaceTime. I couldn't get on, but now I'm here. Thank you. I want to refer to something that was back a little bit ago, and it may not be time, appropriate any longer. But when we were talking about, when you do something and everybody gets blamed, or it's more, it has more impact than just what your own punishment will be. Which one of us didn't grow up hearing from our parents that it would be, what if we did something, it was going to be a shanda for the goyim. Like, if we did something that was wrong, us individually, people were going to look at it and they were going to judge. People were going to look at it. Oh, there's an echo. Do you have an echo?
Yeah, I'm not sure where it's
I
coming
hear
from.
it.
I'm trying to. You know what? If
All right.
everybody could, if everybody could mute except Marilyn, maybe we can. Or,
Anyway, as I was saying, and maybe it doesn't mean anything, but it just threw me back to my childhood, when I would remember my parents saying that if I did something that and I was judged for doing it as a Jew, that it was going to affect all of my people. It wasn't just going to be a blight on me, but rather many Jews would be judged for my behavior, and that it was important to not do that. And it's just something that I remember from childhood, and it seemed like that was, I mean, I'm not saying it's good, but it might be true.
I think that goes back to what Aviva was saying about the whole community being, involved.
Correct. And I'm just saying that even in our age, I mean, I was born in 46. I wouldn't have remembered it before I was 10, probably, or maybe 8, whatever. And I'm just saying that was a thing that I heard not more than once. So,
I think if anyone reads Bret Stephens in the New York Times, a few weeks ago, he took that concept and said, this should not be leading our lives, because as Jews in America, regardless of historically how well accepted, we seem to have been, there's always that thing that says, if you're a well-to-do Jew and you're a benefactor role, you must have gotten your wealth through some
ill-gotten gain.
Right. And if you're poor and you need services, well, you're that Jew who mooches off society. And he just says, that's, like, as Jews, we can't be concerned with that. Because that's always going to be there.
But that's a mouthful, that it's always going to be there. It's not always going to be there necessarily if you're white Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
Oh, no. I'm saying it's always going to be there as Jews.
I get that. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
That's why I was saying I was taking ownership for something that I had heard since childhood, that we had to be mindful of what we did beyond what the effect would be just to us.
Well, but that's part of our job. We cannot only we have to be mindful of the effects of
correct
on others, and in our literature, others are all others,
right?
Even our enemies.
Correct. I'm not disagreeing.
I heard I heard the same thing, Marilyn, growing up.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. We're a little older than you, Aviva, and we didn't spend time in another country, but this was definitely, what was being said to us as kids.
Yeah, and still is in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ruth Ellen, and then I'm going to.
Part of that is situational. It does seem, here we go again, the Tevye, if we're the chosen people, couldn't Hashem choose somebody else every once in a while? But Marilyn, think about the people who were saying these things, our grandparents and parents who were blamed for everything in the Russian
Right.
Pale, and so
Yes.
America, we started to turn the corner on that, but it was never totally gone,
No.
even back then. Remember the movie Gentleman's Agreement?
Yeah.
I keep going back to the fact that my parents went to look at a house when their family was growing, and when my mother brought my father back to see one that she liked, they said, we decided we don't want to sell to Hebrews. This is in 1958,
Yep.
before fair housing or whatever, so we're constantly have that
Exactly.
worry. The question is whether other groups have that same kind of group responsibility, or it's
Well,
group.
I think
Yeah,
other
well,
minorities.
then there's within the group and without the group. So
Right.
do you get blamed within the group? That's one thing. People from outside the group blaming people in the group for what somebody else did or is doing, or that what they disagree with, that's another thing. So if you look at today and anti-Semitism on the rise,
Parents were they were protecting us because we were in a unique situation, maybe relative to other quote unquote ethnic groups, even though they've all, the Irish, when you start looking at American history, you see that it's been endemic to everybody, like, except,
Yeah,
the white
what I don't know is, I mean, I guess I could do some research and find out, but I don't know that all other minority ethnic groups take to heart the responsibility of not causing harm to the group. I don't know that. I'm not saying they don't. I'm saying I don't know that it becomes a group responsibility.
Nice.
that what becomes a group responsibility.
The consciousness that if you do something untoward, that not only will you reap the benefit or the harm, but that your whole community is going to be castigated because of your crimes or your indifferences or your mistakes, even just your
I think
mistakes.
that's very often the case, don't you?
I think it's definitely the case. I just don't know if Jews carry this. I'm not the only one. Like Arnie just said, he did it, and Ruth Ellen heard it, and I think most of us heard it. Like, pay attention to what you're doing, because it's not just going to fall on you. It's going to fall on our. Yes.
Yeah,
No, I was just going to say, I don't think it's just us. I think maybe it's not a matter of type, it's a matter of degree, because you can look in the African American community and you will find that, even dramatized, you will find the same situation that, if the whole idea of the welfare queen or this, that, and the other thing, a whole racial group is assigned the characteristics
They're lazy, they're this, whatever it
of
is.
certain stereotypes.
Yeah, I'm not saying the
But it's not the
stereotype's not
people who
there.
aren't in.
The
I
question
think
I'm raising.
I think in their households, they also got, but maybe not to the same degree. I don't know.
I mean, we're a pretty small group to be carrying such a huge responsibility.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying we do.
When I was growing up, I kept hearing from different peoples, oh, you're the chosen people, but they didn't always mean it like in a good way,
Right.
and it was different in context with who said that,
Right.
and that always bothered me. It always resonate, no matter what their intention,
That's a pretty common kind of way of saying,
I
who do you
know,
think
but
you are?
yeah, it was definitely a way of differentiating. When I went away to college, this kid next door in my dorm room came up to me and he said, "I heard you were a Jew." I go, "Yeah, it's true." And he said, "Where are your horns?"
Yeah.
I go, "What are you talking? A picture of this statue by this guy from Italy?" And
I
Okay, but
experienced
I
that
think we're
in
getting
Colorado.
carried away off the subject here of Aaron's two sons and the idea of the community, also being included in their arrogance and punishment.
I think you wanted to say something before we move on. Go ahead. You had your hand up.
I forgot it when Arnie brought up the horns. I thought of Alan Pottinger, the guy who built our stove for us,
Oh,
who had
gosh.
never met a Jew before me. And
And
I
he's-
ordered a stove from him. When I came to pick it up, he said, "I know you're a Jew. I couldn't see the horns. So as soon as you left, it sent me back to my Bible."
This is
You know,
in
it's
Hawaii?
it was very different living in a absolute over the top Southern Baptist
Oh,
community
Southern, yeah, South.
where
South,
everybody in the community was basically
Yeah.
looking at us, the one Jewish family,
Yeah.
and trying to figure out the what, the where, the how. They could not actually fathom that we were there. We had basically one person who took it on, our neighbor, Dorothy. And Dorothy was the most righteous member of the Southern Baptist community where we were, in my opinion. And Dorothy just wanted to know and she wanted to learn. But, Aviva quotes this many times. The reason that the people in that community really, because I was subject to a lot of testifying. I'm digging a trench in the woods all day, and someone's standing above the trench testifying to me the whole time. And, not anything I would ever wish on any of you. But, when I went to Dorothy and I talked to her about this, I said, look, our agreement is you can talk about what you believe in. I can talk about what I believe in, but we're not trying to convince each other of anything. Aviva came to understand that
That's not true.
Dorothy's take on it was that if she didn't bring us around, it threatened her ability to get to heaven. And that was just, wow, oh my gosh, a very different take. And yet, Dorothy she understood. I mean, and she got tremendous benefit out of it. I mean, my mother bought her a ticket and sent her to Israel, a woman who had never even been on a plane.
Oh my.
And Dorothy's comment was, that photograph of the road outside there, it's just like the road to E-Town. Yeah, they had roads in Israel too. Yeah.
I recommend, we actually have a pretty short parasha today, so we're going to plow through the rest of chapter 10 and then we'll read chapter 11 in 3 segments. So somebody please read.
I'll read.
This is chapter 10? No.
And so
yeah.
do not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die, for the Lord's anointing oil is upon you. And they did as Moses had bidden. And the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, drink no wine or other intoxicant, you or your sons, when you enter the tent of meeting, that you may not die. This is a law for all time throughout the ages. For you must distinguish between the sacred and the profane, between the unclean and the clean. And you must teach the Israelites all the laws which the Lord has imparted to them through Moses. Moses spoke to Aaron and to his remaining sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, take the meal offering that is left over from the Lord's offering by fire and eat it unleavened beside the altar, for it is most holy. You shall eat it in the sacred precincts, inasmuch as it is your due, and that of your children from the Lord's offerings by fire, for so I have been commanded. But the breast of elevation offering and the thigh of gift offering and your sons and daughters with you may eat in any clean place, for they have been assigned as a due to you and your children from the Israelites' sacrifices of well-being. Together with the fat of fire offering, they must present the thigh of gift offering and the breast of elevation offering, which are to be elevated as an elevation offering before the Lord, and which are to be your due and that of your children with you for all time, as the Lord has commanded. Then Moses inquired about the goat of sin offering, and it had already been burned. He was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, Aaron's remaining sons, and said, why did you not eat the sin offering in the sacred area? For it is most holy, and he has given it to you to remove the guilt of the community and to make expiation for them before the Lord. Since its blood was not brought inside the sanctuary, you should certainly have eaten it in the sanctuary as I commanded.
Huh.
And Aaron spoke to Moshe, see, this day they brought their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord, and such things have befallen me. Had I eaten sin offering today, would the Lord have approved? And when Moshe heard this, he approved. Remembering from past years that this is a hard one to get your head.
So there is an interesting thing that happens in this parasha, in this portion here. So the term sofer, which we understand to be a scribe, comes from the word to count. And so scribes, in order to make sure that they were doing things right, would often count and make sure they're in the right place. So in the middle of these lines that you just read, in line 16, is the term darosh, darash, which is considered to be the exact halfway point of the Torah. Darosh darash is in the context of what it says in the sentence, it doesn't matter as much as what it says. Darosh darash is surely inquired. How is it translated? Then Moses inquired, but by using the darosh darash, it is he surely inquired, or he inquired forcefully, or it was a very important inquiry. So Moses inquired about the sin of offering, and it had already been burnt. He was angry with Elazar and Itamar, which were Aaron's remaining sons, and etc., etc. But the point is that the darosh darash is the exact midpoint of the Torah. And in some schools of thought, I read in two places. One is Rabbi Pressman's book, and another is this Torah tutor book that I sometimes look at. And they both talk about the concept that is the you shall surely inquire is the ultimate understanding what we're supposed to do with the Torah. The idea of studying over and over and never reaching one happy conclusion that says, now we get to rest and we don't have to open it again because we have understood it, and surely not, because surely you should inquire again. So I personally love that explanation. That one speaks directly to me. Yuda, you are muted. I know you're saying something important.
It's possible what you're saying is not correct, because in this particular Torah, it is in this portion, but it's in line 42, and what's marked as the exact middle is a majuscule vav for the word in the center of the word gachon, belly.
Well, that's in the kashrut laws.
That's considered the middle word in the Torah, and that's why there's a majuscule.
I just read in two different
I'm
sources.
lost. What are you talking about?
And
We haven't read it
esoteric.
quite yet.
Okay, so I'm saying that I read in two different commentaries that the middle of the Torah is these two words, and Yehuda's saying that there's another school of thought that counts differently, and that it's a word coming up in the last chapter, chapter we're going to read today.
With a majuscule, and that's why it's majuscule, because it marks this is the central letter.
I don't know what a majuscule is.
It's a letter that's bigger than the rest.
I see.
Now, this is a job for AI because it can go in there and in 30 seconds find the exact
gosh.
middle.
Well, I say this is a job for Sherry. We should ask Sherry this. Okay, Alan, what do you have to say about it?
I'm curious, and not about that, but about the way this is phrased. Moses getting angry about this. And it's not like, I mean, we were talking about or I was questioning whether God was acting in anger in punishing Naviv and Avihu. But here it's Moses expressing the anger. And is it what? Because he's worried that you did something wrong and here comes the flame again? Or is it that he was given these instructions and they haven't followed it in his interpretation? It just seems like an odd thing that he's angry over this and that wording being in there.
Moses and being angry and being frustrated, it's a thing.
I think the whole thing is really highly stressful. This is a transition thing that's happening. And besides, I mean, this whole thing of flicking the blood everywhere, that does not rest easy with me ever. And so much of this is about flicking the blood and passing the blood around and all that. I think it's really stressful. And the fact that Moses might tip over and get frustrated, angry, it doesn't surprise me for a second. I would too if I see people flicking blood on something that took us a long time to build and weave, et cetera, only to defame it per se.
Well, he just saw his two nephews get killed. He doesn't want the
Yeah,
other two
that's
nephews.
also
Yeah.
stressful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very stressful. Yeah.
But there's also, I mean, maybe they were full. They said, we already ate. You know, is it like, you know, is this maybe the prototype of eat? You know, you haven't eaten enough yet. You didn't have a big enough meal. Let me bring another plate out.
SS, mein Kind.
Espress, right?
That's so funny. That's, we've all heard it. Not funny. They tried to starve us.
Now my eyes are looking forward to the place Yuda says is the exact middle of the Torah. So I wonder why. Let's just see what Danny Pressman says about it, because I read it in his book. Well, it'll take me a little longer to find it. Does anyone want to just keep reading to the end so we can just say we did it, and then we can discuss everything? Okay. Sarah, you want to read part of it, and then how we're going to do it, Alan. We're going to do 1 through 12, and then I'll tell you the rest: 13 through 23 and 24 through 43, and then leave the last 3 lines because there's such great discussion in the last 3 lines. So, Sarah, if you can read 1 through 12.
The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, "Speak to the Israelite people thus. These are the creatures that you may eat from among all the land animals. Any animal that has true hoofs with clefts through the hoofs, and that chews the cud, such you may eat. The following, however, of those that either chew the cud or have true hoofs, you shall not eat: the camel, although it chews the cud, it has no true hoofs, it is unclean for you. The daemon, I don't know what that is. Although it chews the cud, it has no true hoofs, it is unclean for you. The hare, although it chews the cud, it has no true hoofs, it is unclean for you. And the swine, although it has true hoofs, with the hoofs cleft through, it does not chew the cud, it is unclean for you. You shall not eat of their flesh or touch their carcasses, they are unclean for you. These you may eat of all that live in the water, anything in water, whether it is seas or in the streams, that has fins and scales, these you may eat. But anything in the seas or in the streams that has no fins and scales, among all the swarming things of the water and among all the other living creatures that are in the water, they are an abomination for you. And an abomination for you shall they remain. You shall not eat of their flesh, and you shall abominate their carcasses. Everything in water that has no fins and no scales shall be an abomination for you. Is
Okay.
that it?
Yeah, so this part talked about animals on land and animals in the water.
Didn't talk about birds, though.
No, not yet.
Oh,
That's the next.
that's
Yeah,
the
the
next
next
part.
set of 6 lines or so are going to be that. Go ahead, Arnie.
I just wanted to tell you that rabbits are not ungulates. Having raised rabbits, I know this for a fact. So they don't chew their cud. Chewing cud is like goats and deer, and according to this definition, I guess giraffes are kosher.
You're correct. We raised rabbits for meat before we moved here, and they are not ungulates. Absolutely not.
Yeah, and giraffes are kosher though. So if you ever had neck of giraffe, it's a Michael.
Okay,
Probably
so
not in this lifetime.
the one image that I like out of this that I read somewhere sometime in my life is that the idea of animals who chew their cud, it means that they don't hurry to swallow the term ruminate that we use to talk about, like, mulling over an idea, ruminating over something, that comes from
Yes.
that,
Oh, yeah.
and that they're kosher because they take their time and they don't rush to conclusion. So I just thought I'd mention that one, which I've always liked. The origin of the word ruminate.
Keep reading.
Okay, keep reading. So now it's going to be 13 through 23, 10 lines. Anybody?
Everything in water that has no fins and scales shall be an abomination for you. The following you shall abominate among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination: the eagle, the vulture, and the black vulture, the kite, falcons of every variety, all varieties of raven, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, hawks of every variety, the little owl, the cormorant, and the great owl, the white owl, the pelican, and the bustard, the stork, herons of every variety, the hoopoe, and the bat, all winged swarming things that walk on fours shall be an abomination for you. But these you may eat among all the winged swarming things that walk on fours, all that have above their feet jointed legs to leap with on the ground. Of these you may eat the following: locusts of every variety, especially au gratin, all varieties of bald locust, crickets of every variety, and all varieties of grasshopper, and all other winged swarming things that have four legs shall be an abomination for you. And the following shall make you unclean: whoever touches their carcasses shall be unclean until evening. And whoever carries the carcasses of any of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. Every animal that has true hooves, but without clefts through the hooves, or that does not chew the cud, they are unclean for you. Whoever touches them shall be unclean. Also, all animals that walk on paws among those that walk on fours are unclean for you. Whoever touches their carcasses shall be unclean until evening. And anyone who carries their carcasses shall wash his clothes and remain unclean until evening. They are unclean for you.
Okay, sorry, yeah, it's fine the way you divide it. I'm just looking for that word gachon and I haven't come to it yet. You'll have to point it out. So this division, and we kind of didn't exactly go to the order in the right order. So we went through the animals that fly and animals that swarm, and now we are talking about carcasses. And then in the next grouping, we will talk about the foods that are forbidden. So if anyone wants to say, oh, Arnie, you have a comment. Great.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that whole section about locusts and grasshoppers, is a very compassionate thing, because if you're growing crops and all of a sudden the locust comes and eats everything, all that's left are the locusts. You got nothing else to eat. So I think, that's probably why it was included.
There is all kinds of interesting writing about that, because in the years of the locust swarms, the
7 year.
right, there's always discussion, and I mean it's clear, we have it right there, right? The rabbis agree that they are kosher, and there is something about the fact that they're eating what's already there.
Yeah.
They're sort of pre-grazing for us.
Yeah.
So we eat them. Anyhow.
Somebody have a radio on or something?
It's in the park outside where I'm sitting.
Oh,
Okay, and Vic, apologies, when we muted everyone to find out where the noise was coming from, I muted you, and I don't even know if you know how to unmute. So let me do something. I'm gonna Vic, I hope you're there. I'm going to put this on your screen.
He's unmuted now.
Oh, no, Vic is muted. Okay, so Vic, I'm giving you an opportunity to unmute. If you're there, you should be able to find something on your screen. Okay, hopefully if Vic has something to say, we will be able to figure out how to get him on. All right, I say let's push through because the last 3 lines of the parasha tie things together neatly. So, who's got breath? Uh-oh. Okay, go ahead.
Also, all animals that walk on paws, among those that walk on 4s, are unclean for you. Whoever touches the carcass shall be unclean until evening. And anyone who carries the carcasses shall wash his clothes and remain unclean until evening. They are unclean for you. Following shall be unclean for you from among the things that swarm on the earth: the mole, the mouse, and great lizards of every variety, the gecko, the land crocodile, the lizard, the sand lizard, and the chameleon. I think my pages are flipping slowly. I don't see the next page yet.
Your internet is not very strong because I'm also hearing you sort of waving in and out sound-wise. I don't know if anybody else is experiencing that.
Go ahead. I just don't see the next page yet.
Okay, well, let's have someone else. Marilyn, you want to do a little bit of reading? You're there?
I just got to
Go
know.
ahead and I'll go ahead and finish if you just want to get going.
Oh, he's got it now.
Okay, okay. Let's see if Craig can keep us going, and if not, then Ruth Ellen, I'll ask you to read.
All right, those are for you, the unclean among all the swarming things. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be unclean until evening, and anything on which one of them falls when dead shall be unclean, be it any article of wood or a cloth or a skin or a sack, any such article that can be put to use shall be dipped in water, and it shall remain unclean until evening. Then it shall be clean. And if any of those falls into an earthen vessel, everything inside it shall be unclean, and the vessel itself you shall break. Somebody go ahead if they have the page.
Okay. As to any food that may be eaten, it shall become unclean if it came in contact with water. As to any liquid that may be drunk, it shall become unclean if it was inside any vessel. Everything on which the carcass of any of them falls shall be unclean. An open oven or stove shall be smashed. They are unclean, and unclean they shall remain for you. However, a spring or cistern in which water is collected shall be clean. But whoever touches such a carcass in it shall be unclean. If such a carcass falls upon seed grain that is to be sown, it is clean. But if water is put on the seed and any part of a carcass falls upon it, it shall be unclean for you. If an animal that you may eat has died, anyone who touches its carcass shall be unclean until evening. Anyone who eats of its carcass shall wash his clothes and remain unclean until evening. And anyone who carries its carcass shall wash his clothes and remain unclean until evening. All the things that swarm upon the earth are an abomination. They shall not be eaten. You shall not eat among all things that swarm upon the earth anything that crawls on its belly, or anything that walks on 4s, or anything that has many legs, for they are an abomination. You shall not draw abomination upon yourselves through anything that swarms. You shall not make yourselves unclean therewith and thus become unclean. For I, the Lord, am your God. You shall sanctify yourselves and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not make yourselves unclean through any swarming thing that moves upon the earth. For I, the Lord, am he who brought you up from the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall be holy, for I am holy. These are the instructions concerning animals, birds, all living creatures that move in water, and all creatures that swarm on earth, for distinguishing between the unclean and the clean, between the living things that may be eaten and the living things that may not be eaten.
It was not in this particular writing, but in my Torah, the word gachon, the 3rd or 4th word in the in line 42, the vav is larger in mine.
Right. And so now I have an explanation. I did find it in the book. I just remembered it from last year. It says here, this is from Danny Preston's book. He refers to the tractate in the Talmud. The early scholars were called Sofrim because they used to count all the letters of the Torah. Thus they said the Vav in Gachon marks half the letters of the Torah. Darosh Darash, which is what I was talking about earlier, is the half of the words, if counting the words. And then Va'itgala is half the verses. That's another word, and I don't know where it is in here. These two words, Darosh Darash, the exact halfway mark of the Torah. This is to teach us that the entire Torah revolves around constant inquiry. One must never stop studying and seeking ever deeper and broader understanding of the Torah.
It also promotes mathematics.
Yes. Craig, I'd love to hear you, but I'd
And
want to
proves
see your
that two
face
things
too.
can be true at the same time. They can both be. Wait.
Yeah. Go ahead, Craig.
That word abomination, and perhaps it's overused. In English, it means that it's disgust both of them, and it just seems that the same penalty for I don't know, eating a cat up, committing murder should be different.
So the word is tameh. I believe the word that you're referring to. You're kind of coming in choppy in and out, but I heard you say the use of the word abomination.
Right.
Yeah. So shoot, now I'm hearing my echo. Let me try again. So the word tameh, which is translated as an abomination, is impure. And what we're getting close to Parashat Kedoshim, which is the holiness codes. So this parasha ends specifically with talking about the holiness of the things that you eat. Right? That's the culmination of this parasha is very detailed, the laws of kashrut and it's very pictorial. You can picture these animals. These have 4 legs, and these have their bellies on the ground, and these fly in the sky, and these swarm. Again, what's the connection to how the parasha started, which is the time that the people are ready for the consecration of the Mishkan? That there is no given simplicity. And if you look for it, you're just plainly not going to find it. That there are, you're the ones to say something very urgently.
No, I was waving goodbye to Arnie.
Oh, Arnie's leaving.
He's gone.
Okay. But that's the tie-in. The last few lines that Ruth Ellen just read talk about this is why it's about holiness. So the whole thing about kosher laws are not about anything except holiness, and holiness requires self-examination and self-awareness and self-control. As we saw in the story of Nadav and Avihu, that they may have done things for the right reasons, but they lost themselves in the moment and did not exercise self-control. That's one explanation.
I just have a quick response to Sarah's question about what is a daman. It's similar to a marmot. And it's a little rodent-like creature.
Cute. It's cute.
Yeah, they do look cute. I don't know how they look on a dinner table, but
Yeah. It's funny growing up. My mother, I was never allowed to touch anything dead. I was told, don't you ever touch anything dead. Like an animal that died in the street or got hit by a car or whatever. I just remember I was always warned against that. I think you could get some terrible disease or something from touching a dead thing.
What about the water purification? Yeah, I mean, we've drawn from this. I mean, what you have to do to kosher a kitchen, or to if you know, heaven forbid, a treif or a milchik fork gets used for fleisch. There's all sorts of procedure, but it all comes down to just soaking it in water.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe I could be heard better now. My point about abomination is that it seems like it's a harsh penalty for everything, kind of to the death penalty being overused. I could understand the word "it's wrong," "it's treif," but abomination is a really strong word, and I don't know
So
go ahead.
the difficulty in translation, because in the Hebrew, with the use of the word tameh, it also implies that if, because again, tameh is impure. So it shall be not right for you to partake of it. But embedded in the word tameh is which is impure, is the ability to purify. And so in the translation, you don't get that sense. But in the Hebrew, every time you use the word tameh, the opposite of it is tahor. So if something is tameh, you can make it tahor. If something is impure, you can make it pure. So in the translation, nothing there reminds you of that, because the word abomination is so horrible in itself, it does not offer a counterpart.
Why did
Well, actually, everything that God creates is beautiful and pure. It's just impure to eat it or to handle it a certain way. The insect or the bird or the unkosher animal in and of itself is good. It's part of God's creation. So it's really, it's the way that you handle the animal, or whether or not you eat the animal, that is the impure or abomination. I agree, it's a strong word, but I also hear what you're saying, Aviva. It basically means impure, correct?
Well, after we hear Alan, I want Craig to just point out to a specific line so I can actually look up a specific line and see what I can find in I have like 3 commentaries ahead in front of me.
Well, I just wanted to you point out, or bring up that even though you're right that we shouldn't try to find an explanation, it's just a matter of these animals are considered unkosher, or these animals are considered forbidden to eat, and not look for a reason. So that, for instance, even with the case of the pig, it's explained that it has a hoof, but has hoofs, but it doesn't chew the cud, so it didn't meet the requirements. But I think it's telling that almost all the animals that are forbidden, other than four-legged like farm animals, are predators of some sort. And while many animals are omnivores, like chickens eat insects, and so we could say that they're not just eating vegetable matter; they're eating whatever is in front of them. But they're still okay. The animals that are strictly forbidden are almost all predators.
I found a couple of references, and first of all, I want to apologize. I'm using the wrong term. Sheketz is the word, not tameh. So sheketz is translated in English as abomination, in that it is something that is detestable. So, right, and so the term sheketz, it legally is not. It's not a legal term. So that when you talk about killing another person is an abomination, but I don't think it's used in the Hebrew in the same way. So specifically, I found 3 or 4 lines that you're talking about there, like specifically with the seafood part. I didn't. I'm not very good at thinking on my feet, but the lines you were talking about would be. Oh, here, Alan has it. Right, 42. That's where I was at 42 and 43. Yeah. So I don't know that, again, this is specific to dietary laws, and I don't know if we can expand them to a greater understanding of what is abhorrent, or the things that are considered to do that are abhorrent before the Lord, because those are things like murder and things like that. But this is specific, this language is specific here to dietary laws.
Because you can use now, let me ask you, for example, a rabbit, are you allowed to use the animal for something else? Like its fur, for example? Or a bird, are you allowed to use its feathers?
So here you're getting into complexity. In essence, there is nothing against it, but in spirit, let's talk about the spirit of these laws. So in spirit, the original idea in the Garden of Eden is that humans don't eat animals, right?
Yeah.
Animals are a living thing. They have blood carries
Yeah.
the soul, etc. Right? So the big compromise was that humans could eat animals, but only under certain conditions. So the idea that harming an animal or hurting an animal is against what we are supposed to do. So how does it refer to fur? You can say, well, if you're talking about beating baby seals to death in order to get their special fur to make a special coat, that would be not okay. But does it extend to all fur? Clearly not, right? Because we know that leather was used, all throughout the
Pretense or whatever.
Right. So it's about the intention. So if you're clubbing a dead seal in order to wear a status symbol,
yeah, of course,
there's more wrong there. Although the implication is that all killing of animals may be wrong, and that it was a big compromise between humans and God. Yuda?
You're actually allowed to do anything with an animal like a pig other than eat it. You can be a pig farmer and you can butcher it and sell it to the market. You can profit off the pig. You cannot eat it.
Yeah, that's what I was.
And there's long tractates in the Talmud about this. You're allowed to benefit from these things that are forbidden to eat.
And so we've had discussion about abomination being unclean or unhealthy, but as I explored the roots of kashrut, I'm persuaded that it has nothing to do with it being clean or good for you. And the reason we can't eat lobster or bacon or ham is because God said so. Isn't that it? I mean, it's just because God said so. We know now that you can cook pork just fine. It's not unhealthy. And you think God would have been aware of the future and that could be done. But isn't that the basis for keeping kosher, which is why I have a problem with it? Is because it's like when I asked my parents why, and they said, because we said so. I want more than that. Yeah. So, and it's not just that God said so, but he's saying, if you do it, it's an abomination. How can eating bacon be an abomination?
Well, do you think, Craig, that it was to keep the Hebrew people separate from other groups? Like you can't go over and eat with the other groups over there?
Maybe, but maybe that's
a tribal thing.
And I prefer to eat with non-Jews sometimes, or to eat in a restaurant. So I don't want to be completely separate. I respect people who keep kosher, but isn't the consensus is that it's just because God said so? Why we
that's that's the great discussion. Is it a discipline? Because Maimonides, who was a physician, he definitely had some opinions about that the kosher laws had something to do with health.
Yeah.
But the prevailing opinion about why kosher is because God asked the Israelites to separate themselves. The word kadosh, we tend to think only that it means holy, but it means separate. Lehakdish or litkadesh means to separate, and so it is a separation. The Israelites take upon themselves an agreement, and that agreement is to be separate in a way that they they made an agreement to carry the covenant. The covenant is not only for the Israelites, but they must separate themselves in order to fulfill it for all people. So, in modern Reform rabbis don't necessarily keep kosher because they say that is not the most important. The most important is the things that you do that affect other people. And so if you're eating and staying healthy and you're buying organic this and that was grown with the greatest of care and butchered lovingly or whatever, you're keeping the spirit of the kosher. So that's that is part of what being Jewish is. You do have to interpret. You have to interpret for yourself. But this clearly says, because I said so, because I am the God who brought you out of Egypt. I have asked you to separate yourselves and to be holy as I am holy.
We see one example after another in the reading of the Torah that there's a separation between us and them. It says we're not doing, that the first child that naturally inherits everything. And one example after another, we don't do it the way other people do it. The Hammurabi Code, in some ways, is the main document against this particular thing. And the Hammurabi Code distinguishes between three completely different classes of people, each of whom has a set of rules unique to them. That's not the way we do it. We do it, everybody's the same. And I think a lot of the Torah is just that. We are going to be different, and we're going to be different by doing these things. I don't think there's a justification other than that. We're going to be different because we do these things.
I don't know if this is germane, and it may be the shortcoming of translating into English, but I think of the other place where we've heard abomination being described, and that's in the forbidding of homosexuality, and actually in several of in that section. I'm trying to remember where that is. But that there are several different activities that are described in the English version, at least, of being an abomination. And I don't know if that's the same word that's being used there.
That's where I got confused, because the word sheketz here in what Craig was, where's Craig? Okay. In what Craig brought up, the repeated word in Hebrew is sheketz. And in the other references, like about the laws of that are interpreted to be anti-homosexuality, I don't think it's the word sheketz. I'm actually trying to look it up, but I'm not
too slow.
Not quick enough. But I'll come up with it. But yeah, the word sheketz is not the same one.
To my 2 cents, because I just looked up etymology of abomination, and the AI talks about it's from the Greek. But the biblical context, they said, is used to translate the two terms you said, but they translate sheket as being something filthy or an idol. So it's filthy. God finds it offensive, filthy. It's not exactly the same as being illegal per se, to make the distinction that I think Craig is trying to bring out because of the way we connote these words in our own experience.
Because in the prohibition against homosexuality, there's a lot of discussion. I think that in the Plowed commentary, it talks about it too, that what's wrong about it is that it was used as a way to denigrate people and to enslave them. That it was something that was done, you glorified yourself by being able to do whatever you wanted, including have sex with boys, young boys specifically. So that the abomination there is a people abomination, and these things are not. These are holiness codes that have to do with God says, I said so. So it's a pretty big difference. In fact, and the God saying, I said so, is about self-discipline. It's not about how you wrong other people. There's nothing, you're not wronging anybody by eating a shrimp. But you're letting your guard down in terms of all the other. If you think about everything you do and you don't take anything for granted, supposedly you're a better person because you're conscientious. But the same thing can happen, and that's why I love the end of this parasha, tying back to the beginning. If you then concentrate only on these obscurities, you may lose yourself and become overly zealous, and then lose the real you know, work of being a human among humans, which is the major thing that I think is what God asks us to do.
Interesting. You may lose yourself. I like that part. That's the interesting part. Yehuda, you're
Isn't that what Nadav and Abihu seem to have done? They lost themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Back
the
to
two
that.
schools of thought. In either case, they lose themselves. One is in advance because they thought more highly of themselves, and the other is in the act of wanting to be so caught up in the moment.
They also had a certainty that what they were doing was right, no humility built in at all. And it's sort of, even though it's hidden, there's a condemnation of being a fundamentalist in that particular part of this parsha.
On the other hand, practicing also brings a certain enlightenment with it. The actual practicing of it enhances learning of it in your everyday life. So there's also that side of it.
Sure.
And preservation of it.
I think we sort of assume that a certain amount of what's going on with them is they just didn't know. The rules weren't laid out clearly yet. They didn't know. The tabernacle was just starting up, and immediately this happened. I mean, in some ways, that's the explanation. The tabernacle was starting up. They were establishing the procedures, the flicking of the blood, and the blah, 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 blah. And these guys just didn't know. They didn't know that there shouldn't be two pans of.
But they kind of did, because they were told not to do it, right? Weren't they told not to something with the fire? I mean, it's kind of like, is it kind of like Moses striking the rock? There's a certain they're playing God a little bit in there with the fire, playing with fire.
I don't think they were told. Like that's just, it's up in the air about why they ended up doing that. They just decided to do it. But there's an assumption also that they're impetuous. They're children. They want to do. I think in their heart of hearts they wanted to do right. And even if they wanted to cast a favorable light upon themselves because they were doing this amazing thing, there was a part of them that wanted to do right. They were trying to do what was supposed to be done to honor and glorify God. They just got it wrong.
When you just said that, Yehuda, it made me think of Cain and Abel. What is it? I mean, these repetition things happening. Cain and Abel both try to make a honor to Hashem, right? Wasn't that it?
Yes.
Right? And
basically.
One was accepted and the other wasn't. And look what the consequence of that was. So what is it? Maybe there's a bigger object lesson there. I'm not sure what it is, but every time when we read this through and I start to, I'm more familiar, my memory makes these connections now, and I don't think they're for nothing. Does anybody else?
Isn't part of this God still learning how to be God?
Well, and it also has to do with ego.
I wouldn't put it past being a lesson to the next people. Next time this fire ritual comes up, you're going to be shaking when do I have the right fire here? I better do it the right way. I mean, right. the concept of putting the fear of God in somebody is literal here.
That's it.
And forget the flicking.
The reason this is so much more frustrating is that there's not seem to be anything in this text. I mean, I'm sure the rabbis have doing this. Whereas, Sarah, your point, I mean, in the text of the story itself in Exodus, it literally told Moshe not to strike the rock, right? And he did anyway. It's not clear exactly.
He didn't tell him not to strike the rock, but he told him to speak to the rock.
Right. But I mean, here with the sons, it just says it happens. It does. It's
so Moses took it in his own hand, and I just somehow get the gist because of the way that they did it, that the ego overtook and they started playing God, and that's what happened to Moses. He started playing God. He struck the rock instead of speaking to it. And he knew immediately. Well, these kids, they got burned up, which seems a little bit over the top to me. But especially since you're saying, oh, they were young and, their little egos were, and here they are with this flaming ritual that they got, caught up in it. I can understand. Like, I've gotten caught up in rituals that took me to very lofty places myself in my life. But I didn't burn up.
Are you using lofty how are you using that?
Well, like people chant and their brain waves, they get high. You could get high on drugs, you could get high on chanting, you could get high on meditation, uh, and you could get high on ritual. You could get really high on ritual.
What I'm going to do is stop the live stream here because we read through the whole parsha, and if there's any more discussion, but I think it was a good one.
Amen.
It was a good, considering how many times have we done this one now?
I don't know, but we're on Facebook.
And we still found new things to say. Still found new things to say.
The whole thing is on Facebook. Like every chapter, you could go to Facebook and listen to us